Hello and welcome to this Affinity Photo tutorial. Now, in previous tutorials I've mentioned that I get a camera magazine called Digital Camera, and every month they sort of do, you can download online the Photoshop tutorials, and I've tried to adapt a couple of them for Affinity Photo. Well, in the last sort of 6 months, maybe a bit longer, they've been sort of adding Affinity Photo tutorials as well, and other things like brushes and overlays and presets and things like that. And I was checking one of those out recently, and it was about making a gradient mask, and the chap that made it mentioned that you should, rather than using RGB to select your colours, you should be using HSL. Now, I am not a designer, I'm not a colorist, and I'm just like a hobbyist photographer who just makes sort of videos, hopefully mainly aimed at beginners. And I thought, well, yeah, this was news to me, so I thought I'd have a look at ways of how and why you would pick colours. Now, I want to say at the outset, like I said, I'm not a professional or an expert in colour or anything like that, so I'm going to sort of say this in layman's terms, and hopefully I will not make any major errors, so don't crucify me if I do make a mistake. Right, from the outset, so, we all know that you up here on the right you have the colour tab, where if you double click on one of these, either the sort of background colour or the foreground colour, it brings up the colour chooser. Now, I will come back to this in a minute. I'll just close this down, but basically this is like the easiest one to look at because it's a nice big size. But there are many ways and places where you can pick colour. Say for example, you could add a lens filter, and where this sort of colour block here is, if you double click that, or just click it once, you will get a sort of scaled down version of the colour chooser. And you've got the drop down menu here where you get the different options. I think that's pretty much about the only one of the adjustments that has a colour option. But let's say you want a rectangle or any of these shapes, at the top here you can pick the colour for the fill, or you can pick the colour for the stroke. Same goes for text. If I select text, you have the colour of the font. Gradient, again, if you select that, select it, up here you've got the colour, and you can select the colour for the gradient, or swatches and other options for colours. So now these are sort of places where you can select colours other than the main colour chooser. Similarly, also in the text effect, not just text, sorry, the layer effects, a lot of these have colour options. That's my Gaussian blur. Outer shadow, so you can select colour for there. Inner shadow, obviously. Outer glow, you can pick the colour. Inner glow. Outline, you can select colours this way. And even like 3D, you've got the ambient colour and specular colour that you can select. Not sure there'll be any on beveling, but oh yes, there is. On the highlights and shadows, you can get to the colour to change there. Obviously colour overlay and gradient overlay. So there are many places where you are able to pick colours within Affinity Photo. So let me come back to this main colour chooser, which is the easiest one to visualize. And the drop down menu, you can have red, green, blue sliders. The HSL, which is hue, saturation and luminance, I believe. CMYK, which is cyan, magenta and key, which is basically black, which is what printers sort of use. And then you have the HSL Colour Wheel, hue, saturation and lightness. But also in this panel down here, you have the RGB numbers, the HSL numbers, the CMYK numbers, and you also have the hex code. Now this is just a sort of a special code for red, green and blue. Currently it's set on FF, and it just gives you the code there. Some tutorials they will, if they want you to have a certain colour, you will get a hex code rather than RGB or HSL. Let me just come on to the actual coloured layer, and if I move this, that hex code will change. So if I pick this dark blue for example, its hex code is 0300C4. But similarly the RGB code is 30196 and HSL 241-138. So you see, wherever sort of you're moving this around, all those numbers change. One of the things that doesn't change is the S or saturation in the HSL code, because if you keep an eye on that there, whichever colour I'm selecting, the except when we get up to white or wherever I went off screen I think. Oh yeah, I've gone up to white, so it's now gone down to 0. But anything that is not white, it stays on 100. Except when you come down to black. I've just corrected myself. So black and white is the only times when the saturation is not on 100 when you're sort of set on RGB sliders. Now if I come to the HSL sliders, again I can move this around and all the numbers change except for like the saturation, which again I'm even when you come up to white it's on 100. Come down to black, it's on 100 because the colour is at 100%. Now you do also have a HSL Colour Wheel, which a lot of people like and prefer. I personally do not really get on with this, but you sort of pick the colour that you want, sort of rough idea. Let's go for sort of this orangey colour here, and the inner colour here is where you alter the lightness and saturation, because you see here the hue colour now stays constant because the hue colour is here, that's 31, and I can alter, if I bring this down and just stay on the line here, it is only altering the lightness. And if I go up on this side, staying right on the line, it will increase, make it darker, and that makes it lighter. But if you bring it anywhere inside, you can make it sort of lighter, but also alter the saturation of that colour. The CMYK works in a similar way to the others, wherever you move this around. The CMYK colours are here, and the sliders for CMYK are there. Now you do also have hue, saturation and lightness. So let's go back onto RGB, which is something I understand a bit better. Let's say we pick this red colour here, and you come down to hue, you can alter that hue pretty much like you could in the HSL Colour Wheel. You're not altering the colour as such. You're altering this. In this case, it's the saturation, but you can change the lightness by moving up and down, and left and right. You change the colours. So I would imagine that the hue, saturation, lightness is more sort of specialised. Most people would either use RGB or HSL as their colour picking of choice, which mode they use. So let's have a look at this lens filter option that I had here. Again, like I said, if I click on this, we get a smaller version, and again you can change the colour, and you can see the colour is changing up there, so you can see which colour is actually being selected. And I'm just sort of holding down the left mouse button and dragging to sort of select a colour. Again, obviously you could just move the sliders, and then you have the similar options that were in the main colour chooser, RGB sliders, hex sliders, and the colour wheel should be down here. Colour wheel, and then you've got the hue, saturation and lightness, and you can also select sort of greys. It doesn't seem to be having too much effect on this particular, because this is just a colour filter over the top. I'm just trying to show you how you can, the different options that you can select, and you can also pick from swatches as well. So let me get rid of that. So let's have a look at sort of a more practical use, and we're going to just use this picture that I took of where I live, and I'm going to add a gradient map, and we're going to just make a very basic sepia. So I'm going to select this end node here, pick on the color picker, and I want black, so I'm going to come right down to the bottom here. So I've got 0, 0, 0. Now I pretty much always use RGB when I pick colors, but you can use whichever option you want. But I'm going to come to the blue node on this end, and I want white, so I'm going to drag this to the top. So I've got 255 across the board, and then in the middle node I want a sort of dark brownish colour, so I'm going to go for about there for now. I do have a group down here, and let me just drag this up to the top. Now this is a sort of a previous sort of test run that I did, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in this colour 80790. So I've got 8079 and 0, and I also want this on the 45% position, so I'm just going to click and drag this down to 45%. So I have the colours that I would sort of pick, or I picked in my previous attempt, and it was 80790. Now, like this chap said in this video that I watched, it's probably best to use HSL. So if I go to the HSL slider, we should have 59, 100 and 16. So that is the HSL settings for the RGB settings that I put in. And this is because like saturation at that colour is at 100% and lightness, luminosity is at 16. But you can sort of, now you can drag down the saturation and get a totally different colour, and again you can tinker with the lightness, make it darker or lighter, and get different colours again. So what I'm going to do is I've got the ones in brackets here, that's 59, I'll make this one 53, and the bottom one 21 is what I'm on. So if I then come back to the RGB sliders, it should be 82, 81, 25. So as you can see, the colour difference, if you reduce the saturation and lightness, obviously you will get a different colour, although technically, I haven't moved anything beyond altering the numbers, but it does have a major effect when you reduce the colour via saturation or lightness, and it's probably a lot easier than sort of trying to pick random colours. It's probably easier to, if I go back to HSL sliders, to get the hue that you want roughly. So if you know you want a blue, for example, pick that blue and then alter your saturation and lightness to get the colour blue that you want, rather than going to the RGB sliders and just trying to randomly try and find a colour by sort of clicking around or moving this to sliders to get the colour you want. Again, that's probably where the colour wheel probably helps in this respect, because again you can pick the colour you want, for example green, and then move the inner area to get the shade or lightness that you want. So in my future efforts I may try and use the colour wheel more rather than just RGB, but hopefully this will help some people understand sort of the difference between RGB and HSL, and how to use the colour chooser, be it the main one or one of the smaller versions that are available in various places in Affinity Photo. Hopefully I've explained it reasonably well, and thank you for watching, and goodbye.